Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing out there, podcast land? I'm Keith Williams. Welcome to Talk Show Presents. And back by popular demand, we got Terri Michal here,
Hey
field
there.
organizer for Birmingham
Birmingham
AFT,
AFT.
American Federation of Teachers.
That's
And
right.
last time we got into a conversation about charter schools, and we had such a great response with that. So we're back for
Yeah.
round two. And so I want to jump right in and talk about what happened recently here in Birmingham, where we had a charter school organization out of Memphis, Tennessee called Freedom
Yeah.
Prep. They came to
Mhm.
Birmingham. And so we're going to start off that conversation with that. They
Okay.
met at a local church, and they also did a Zoom call as well. And you notice that everybody that was at the church and everybody that was on Zoom, they support this charter school going into a local community, and they don't live here. So is that a growing trend? You got people that don't even live in a certain community, and they think that they know what's best for the community. Is that a common thing?
Well, absolutely. And I think that is part of, I think, Birmingham City Schools' problem is that there's so many people that think that they understand Birmingham City Schools' problems and shortcomings, and they've never been involved in any way, shape, or form. We find, a lot of parents that have never had a child in Birmingham City Schools think they know what is wrong with Birmingham City Schools. We get elected officials outside of Birmingham, well, even inside of Birmingham, that think they know what's wrong with Birmingham City Schools. And unless you have been intimately involved by way of working for them, being on the board, or having a child go there, then whatever you think about Birmingham City Schools is probably incorrect. And so
So,
I think that's the same way with the charter school people. And they have this attitude because they supposedly have worked in other states with other students that they know exactly what Birmingham City Schools needs. And so when
so,
I spoke at that meeting, that's what I tried to put out there is you don't know us. You don't know Birmingham City Schools.
so the whole part of the time that they was presenting, whatever they presented, they painted, Birmingham City Schools as a failing school district,
Yep.
and they're saying, "Hey, we're the alternative. We're the best." And then the part that really struck me is that when you had some people that that say, "Hey, I cannot be involved in my child's education because I'm working 2 or 3 jobs, and we hardly have any food in the house, and blah 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 blah." And here you go, them saying that, well, we can help you with that. I'm like, how in the world
Right.
are you going to do that?
Mhm.
It's nothing but a bunch of false promises. How are y'all going to do that? And the fact of the matter is, if I'm not mistaken, don't they have to raise their own money? And where are they getting their money from?
And that's a really good point. So the thing is that yes, they do have state and federal dollars, and the local dollars, though, there's some how do I say disagreement between the charter school people and the local boards and what type of local funds they're due. So we know the state and federal 100% those charter schools get, just like a traditional public school would, but there's arguments over the local dollars. And so that's why I had kind of talked about having a moratorium, because the problem is I3, Dr. Bice's charter school here on the east side, They have sued Birmingham City Schools and Jefferson County Schools for local funding. And the truth is that Jefferson County Schools and Birmingham City Schools are absolutely right in not giving them any funding because the law does not require it. And so that's where a lot of the conflict is coming in. So Dr. Bias had asked for, like, I believe it was around $1.2 million from Birmingham City Schools. And once it came down to it, it came out in the courts during the case that they had already received that money from the state. So it's like, why are you asking the money from Birmingham City Schools if you've already received it from the State Department of Education? So I don't know if that case is finally solved. But to me, why are we bringing more charter schools in when there's still these lawsuits going on about the local funding? So the state funding, federal funding, it's clear. But
So
with the local
you're
funding,
not
it's
going to,
different.
so you're not going to hear that from them, okay? Because what they're doing
No,
is that they are painting a picture that, hey, public schools districts are failing. We are the alternative, and they painted themselves to say that they are public schools. Now, if that's a truth or that's a lie, that
well,
is charter schools actually considered to be public schools or they're not? So which one is it?
right. And unfortunately, we're bound by the laws that our legislature has set forth. And so, according to the legislature in Alabama and almost every other state, charter schools are public schools. But my response to that, because I lived for 30 years in Huntsville and I did the research, let's look at Boeing. On a typical year, Boeing up in Huntsville, about 70% of their funding comes from our tax dollars because they enter into contracts with the federal government. So they're getting tax dollars for about 70% of their work. Does that make them a public entity? No, they are a private company. But a majority of their work is with the public and is using the public dollars. So with charter schools, it's the same thing. They can take our tax dollars, but that ties them to public education. They don't have to follow any state laws except for the end of the year testing, the state testing. There's a few other small administrative codes. And of course, things like having to have a safe and healthy environment for the students, right? Which we would expect that. But as far as any real state laws, they don't have to follow them.
So how can they? So how can they say? So how can they say that they are considered to be a traditional public school when they really don't have to, follow state law
Right.
except for the
State testing.
standardized testing?
Oh, and they're always going to get their money on testing, right? So, that's a cash cow, the testing industry. But that does put them on the radar, which, recently, it was just like a month ago, I think, all the scores came out. And so we were able to see how the charter schools scored as far as math and reading goes, just like our traditional public schools. And there was nothing impressive about it, especially when it came to the charter schools in Birmingham. There was nothing impressive about their test scores. They scored higher in some areas. We scored higher in some areas. So basically it's a wash. Right now, so far, the charter schools in Birmingham, when it comes to test scores, there's nothing substantially successful about what they have done. And I think that's important for people to know, because like I said at that hearing with Freedom Prep last week, they can make promises. They promise the sun and the moon to these parents and these students who are now desperate for a high quality education. And I get that and I understand it. But we're reaching at the wrong stars because these stars aren't really there. It's a figment, it's smoke and mirrors. Let's say that it's smoke and mirrors what the charter schools can do. And so they're trying to further promote these smoke and mirrors, but yet with all the emphasis that this state puts on test scores, how can we say that there's an advantage to going to the charter schools in Birmingham? But that's putting too much common sense into it.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna be throwing some names out here because I think it's about time we call some people out.
Right. And I'm not going to disagree with that.
It's about time we call some people out. Because first of all, one thing I do not like is when people lie.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like it when people lie. I do not like it when you have an organization which like Freedom Prep, who is made up mostly of an African-American body, is using the black card, to say that, hey, we got to stick together and we got to work together. I was like,
right.
We're not even on the same planet. Don't use that, card with me, because first of all,
right.
One of the main questions that I asked was, because on their application, they said that we had talked to the community and they said the community supported. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, well, who'd you talk to? Because my mind for you, there's a distinction between community and neighborhood. And for those of you who don't know, I'm going to tell you, a neighborhood is the actual place that you live. Our community is the people that live in that neighborhood. So unless you live there in that particular, so if you live in that particular neighborhood, you need to keep your mouth closed. And that goes for the Titusville Development Corporation and Our Lady of Fatima Church, because the majority of y'all don't live in Titusville.
Right.
So why are you even open up your mouth to say that, hey, I support a charter school in which in an area I don't live in? Why are you even open up your mouth? That's for starters. And number two, I don't like it when people lie. At my last neighborhood association meeting in North Titusville, President Michael Broadnax had informed the body, the residents of North Titusville, that the Freedom Prep application has been withdrawn. And I'm like, are you serious? And you know how skeptical I am, Terri, Wanda. You know how skeptical I am. You know I don't go by what everyone tells me. So the next day after that meeting, I fact checked him and find out that that's not the case. And then at our last the second public hearing, guess what? Michael Broadnax did not show up. And I do not want to hear you say, well, I didn't know about it. Well, Mr. Broadnax, I sent you an email. As soon as I heard when the public hearing was going to be, I emailed and called all the neighborhood officers in the Titusville community, North Titusville, South Titusville, and Woodland Park. And I even sent an email to Councilor Crystal Smitherman, who represents Titusville in District 6. Did she show up? Absolutely not. I didn't see Mr. Broadnax there. I didn't see Councilor Smitherman there. But you're going around running your mouth about how you are, you're sticking with us, you're standing with us, but you didn't even show up. And don't tell me why I didn't know, because you got an email. And I can go back to my Gmail account on the sent folder and tell you the exact date and time that I had sent it. So if you coming if you come in with these excuses, you better bring it, because I'm bringing down the house.
Right, but they also, yes, and you've done a wonderful job of letting them know, but also at that Thursday meeting, someone from the church had mentioned that they had contacted the city councilors, right? So it wasn't just you.
So
The church
here's the thing. They
had
said,
sent a
they
correspondence
said
out.
that
Is
they
that
had
not
sent,
correct?
so they said that they had sent, they had sent the letter, uh, they sent the letter downtown. So either that means they have sent it to City Hall or they send it to the Board of Education. Either way, one of them have to have known, about this, even before they went before the school board. You see what I'm saying? But neither entity nor the church came to the community. And again, when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about the people. I'm not talking about
Right.
I'm not talking about the buildings, the houses, the churches, the lands. I'm talking about the people. None of them came to us.
Right.
And then gonna
Well,
have the nerve to say, well, no disrespect. We did that to you. Newsflash, you did.
well, I'm pretty convinced that it had to be the city council they sent that information to, because you have to remember, even though the election was in August, I was a school board member up until the third week of October. And so the applications for the charter schools, the pipeline was already open. Well, let's say it properly, the request for proposals was already out there. And then from November to December is when they collected the applications. So up until mid to end of October, the school board hadn't received anything from the church saying that they were interested into entering any kind of agreement with Freedom Prep. So that's the extent of what I can say. So I don't believe that it was a school board that they contacted or sent any kind of correspondence to. I think that it was probably the city and the city council. That's just my instincts though. But like I said, I hadn't heard anything. The superintendent or no one else, I did not receive any kind of letter in my mailbox or an email from the church about Freedom Prep.
So if something was sent to Dr. Sullivan, I'm quite sure that you would have been aware of that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If by the second or third week of October, if it had been received prior to that, we should have received it.
So
I should have, and the rest of the board, if they sent it to us, I would have received it. So that means it was after that, if they sent it to the school board. But also, we don't want to let them off because Freedom Prep, because in November, it was the end of November, the beginning of December, that they have to submit their application. And we cannot overlook the fact that in the application by Freedom Prep, they indicated that they had met with a school board member and that they had met with someone from Black Alabamians for Education. So they submitted that at the end of November. So that means that meeting came prior to that. So I think that's an important distinction and understanding, because the current board was in place until the third week of October. So who was it that they met with? Who was at the meeting? What did they discuss? And, like you said, in this meeting last Thursday, it was Thursday, right? Where they met because they were appealing to the Charter School Commission. They laid it on the line. They said, we've had how many neighborhood meetings? They said, not neighborhood, sorry, community meetings. It was like 3 or 4. So they're like, we've met with all these people. We've done this, blah, 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 blah. And you and other folks from Tennessee was like, what are you talking about?
You're right. We wasn't aware of these community, meetings.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
No transparency, no integrity, and they are lying their head off. This is what I am talking about. And if they are lying about this incident to where they have been talking to the community, what else are they lying about? And folks,
Yeah.
you need to, you need, so in other words, Freedom Prep cannot be trusted, y'all.
Well, so my view, this is just me and my opinion, is that charter schools are only as strong as a charter school law. And our charter school law is absolutely terrible. But the powers that be lead us to believe that we have, at times, they said the most stringent charter school law. Now they say it's the second best charter school law in the country. But that's the charter school people telling us that. And that's a crazy thing to me, is that the wolf is guarding the hen house. We are trusting what the wolf is saying. And so when we do our own work and we study that law and try to report on it, they treat you like you're crazy, like you're conspiracy theorists, like, but I'm telling you right now, our charter school law, by every measurement that the people in the community find important, is a terrible charter school law. There is no accountability there. And it's the charter school law that allows for exactly what is happening now. And that is that a charter school can come into a community that doesn't want it. They allow for that because there's so many loopholes in the law and it's so poorly written. And like I said earlier, the law is lacking so terribly that it is allowing Dr. Bice to sue Birmingham City Schools and Jefferson County Schools because it doesn't say what local funding the charter schools should get and how they should get it.
I think that
Me.
if you have a charter school that is basically not accountable to the state like your traditional public school districts are, why should they deserve any type of funding or any type of resource? That's what I want to know.
And it's like that goes beyond that because there is no accountability when it comes to the students that are attending it. And that's why Dr. Bice, sued is because it doesn't state what happens is if let's just say 300 students are making it 300 students are at I3 who are zoned for Birmingham City Schools, then the local funding for those 300 students should be passed on to I3. So that means you absolutely right. Systems
Yeah, we are having a problem with Terri Michaels. Yeah, hopefully she'll be back. Based on what was said so far, does anybody else have a comment about what's being said so far? Because I really think it's a really serious issue when you have people coming into your community and trying to put something in your community that, number one, people don't want, and they're trying to shove it to us anyway because they're basically saying that you don't know what's best for your community, but but we do. And I'm like, but you don't live here. How are you gonna tell me what's best for my community and you don't live here? So that part is a very serious matter to have a conversation about. Does anyone have a comment or response of what's been said so far? And then we'll get back to Terri.
Eddie D.
How you doing? What do you have for us?
Who?
Hello, are you there?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm asking, does anyone have a comment or question on what's being discussed so far?
No, I'm here from Huntsville, Alabama, and I have been fighting, I guess, ever since about 5 or 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, right before the legislative session was out, and it was such a controversy about the charter schools and going back and forth. And I totally agree with everything that y'all are saying. Charter schools, not traditional schools, and they have no business getting any of the funding from the traditional schools. It is not fair. It is not just. And if they are going, they need to be held accountable just as the traditional schools are if they think that they are going to come into our state and reproduce charter schools all over Alabama.
Terri, why is it such a large push for charter schools coming into the state of Alabama, and not just any part of Alabama, but particularly in your urban areas? Is
So
that a trend?
that is an awesome question. So there's something called the sweet spot, okay, that the reformers or the people that want to privatize education, there's all kinds of different names for what's happening right now. But these folks have a metrics. Like, okay, let's think about a Cracker Barrel. We all know that Cracker Barrel does a lot of data mining to figure out what locations are best for them to be successful, right? We all know that. And so the thing is it's the same for charter schools. They look at the data and the information, and they have what they call the sweet spot. And that's the location where they feel they will be most profitable. And Birmingham is ground zero for that. And I say that because we have 22,000 students plus or minus, and every school in our district is a Title I school. And that means it's a high poverty school. That's not to say that all of our students are in poverty. That's to say that I believe the number is 60% of our students in our district are living in poverty, okay? So, and 96% is African-American or Latino. And so, the Black and brown community basically is what we're talking about. That is the sweet spot. That's where they make their most money, because are charter schools going into Huntsville? Are they going in to anywhere else? Where are they going? Charter schools are going into Montgomery and into Birmingham. And when new schools for Alabama wrote their grant application asking for $25 million to grow charter schools, they mentioned 4 areas. They mentioned Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, and Huntsville. But we can see by their actions that they're really concentrating on Montgomery and Birmingham. Why? Because there's too big of a do that sweet spot. In Huntsville, they're going to get pushback. They're going to get people needing them out, and not that still you, Keith, and other folks didn't do a wonderful job at the public meetings here, but yet compared to the pushback they get if they went into a community was at least 50% white, you would have is a sweet. That's where they're going to easily make a lot of money off of our students. And they pretty much said it in that grant that they wrote. In the grant they wrote, they out and out said that they have a relationship with Freedom Prep and that getting this grant money will help them get charter schools with Freedom Prep into Birmingham. And they wrote this back in 2018. So we're behind the ball. And I mean, we as in the community, because Freedom Prep didn't get on our radar until when? November, when their application was submitted. And that's why I was so irate in the public hearing this last Thursday, because they have been in behind the scenes meetings with the movers and the shakers, the power people, the elected officials, the people with all the money. They've been talking with them since 2008 about our children and our school system.
But they said, hey, we talked to the community. But they said, hey, you know, we talked to community and we had 3 or 4 meetings. That's what they said. Y'all nothing but a bunch of liars. And nothing but a bunch of lying cowards. That's what you are. And I'm not afraid to say it, y'all, but nothing but a bunch of lying cowards. Y'all have not been transparent with the Tillsville community from day one. And they actually think that they're just gonna sweep this, you know, under the rug and keep certain people out. Let me tell you something. They're even trying to get the Michael Broadnax. Because one of the leaders in the church said that they had a conversation with him. So they're trying to target him so that when we go to our next neighborhood association meeting, he's going to try to convince the neighborhood that, you know, hey, maybe we should consider this.
Right. But
no, we are not backing down.
And so we have to understand how these folks work. And our legislature, we have to understand, because we can't let them off the hook. We're talking about a local meeting and local issues, but we have to understand that it's the legislature's laws that they have passed that has brought us to this point. So we can't let them off the hook. You know, it started with them because they passed these laws. And so what they do, it took 2 or 3 years. They kept bringing the charter school law back. And so with every year, they're gaining more and more traction. I think it's partly because the community just gets tired. It's tiring fighting them year after year because they're coming at us from like 5 different angles. It's not just about charter schools, you know, it's about the don't say gay. It's about the, the CRT stuff. They attack you on several levels and they'll continue doing it until the community gets numb and they get tired. And so that's what happened with the Accountability Act, the Charter School Law. They're just going to keep bringing it back. So the people in our communities, whether it's our city councilors, our mayor, or whoever, they're going to keep hammering away until they finally have what they need to do what they want to do, to really push their agenda. And that's why the community's participation in these public hearings is so important, because community buy-in is part of their set of criteria to approve a charter school. So really the community's voice and participation is huge. It is so important.
So what happens if you have this is, I guess what I'm trying to say is that what if there's an instance in which they try to shut down or dumb down the voice of the community? What do you do in that case?
Well, I would just encourage everyone to look at what happened in, and I want to say it was Washington County. I don't know, I might be getting that confused, but there was a charter school that wanted to come into Alabama into a rural community, and it was, which charter school was it? They have ties to like Turkey. Gosh, I wish I could remember, but the right wing people were feeling very strongly against this charter school. And so they fought it and they fought it, and they were eventually able to shut it down. And so that's why I really want the people in Birmingham to understand that maybe these hearings have already happened, but that's what was happening in another county here in Alabama, and they successfully stopped it because they had a letter writing campaign. They called in, they were able to do media interviews and talk about how they didn't need that in their community, and they were able to shut it down. And what I can do, I apologize because I forget the details of that one. Again, I wasn't involved. That committee did it on their own. And that's what we can do. But here's the thing, it's not just Titusville, it's not just Smithfield. This charter school will affect our entire school system because it's our money, the district's money, the district students that will be taken away and will be in that charter school. So we need to get out of this mindset that this is a Titusville thing or this is a Smithfield thing. This is a Birmingham City School thing. And that's the advantage that this small district had in fighting that charter school, because they all came together. If we had the support of every district in Birmingham City Schools signing a petition or writing a letter or making a call, we can make a difference. But it's just a matter of getting the people to see it and to believe that they can do that. It's already happened once in Alabama, and it can happen again.
I think that's something that we definitely need to look at doing in this case here. Let's shift gears and talk about the school board's role, if they had a role at all to play in charter schools coming here. You know, we had a controversy here, in Birmingham, where you have an openly professed school board member who is a part of an organization that has an agenda of pushing charter schools in the city of Birmingham. We kind of want to touch base on that for a little bit, and how does that position, the position that these board members put themselves in, puts Birmingham City Schools in jeopardy. So that's the next thing that we want to talk about. Terri, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, we're transferring from the car to the house. So the thing is that there's several people on our school board that has very close and intimate links to the charter community. It's a matter of how many of them really realize that. One thing I used to do is I used to put everybody that supported charter schools in one big lump. Okay, I did. I felt like everybody that supports charter schools are just trying to destroy public education, that they're a part of the agenda. But the truth is, there's a lot of good people that support charter schools, but it's because, well, I feel like if these folks really understood what was going on in Birmingham City Schools, they might rethink their stance. So I still have hope that some of these folks that are on Birmingham City School Board, when they as they continue in their role as a school board member, they're going to realize that some of the things that they thought was wrong with Birmingham City Schools maybe is not a real thing. Being on the inside and being on the board affords you a lot of information and access to things, and they may start to change their mind. Because like I said on that Thursday at the public hearing, there's so many ways that Birmingham City Schools is sabotaged. And you don't realize that until you are on the inside. So I'm hoping some of them will change their minds. Most of them are just guilty by association, whether it be the Ed Foundation or the Woodlawn Foundation. But I have to say, and this is just factual, is that the one board member that has a very real relationship with charter schools would be the District 2 person, Neonta Williams. And I'm not saying that because she beat me, okay? She beat me. And to tell you the truth, I wouldn't want to be on this board because I don't know that I would be the best board member, because I would be so upset at a lot of the stuff that's going on. I'm more effective doing exactly what I'm doing right now. I can speak the truth now. The night of the election, I said that's the worst thing they could have done was to get me off the board, because now I'm dangerous, because now I can say the absolute truth and not suffer any consequences from it. But the truth is that Neonta Williams gets paid. Her organization, Black Alabamians for Education, her organization gets paid by New Schools for Alabama. 100% of the work that Black Alabamians for Education does is for New Schools, and it's to get charter schools into 4 areas like we were talking about: Montgomery, Mobile, Birmingham, and Huntsville. But we can see that so far, they have shown zero interest in Huntsville and in Mobile. All of their work has been in Montgomery and in Birmingham. And that's important for people to understand. It really does mean something that they are targeting these communities. And that is who Neonta Williams, District 2 representative of Birmingham City Schools, that's where her nonprofit, Black Alabamians for Education, gets their money. And they have a grant application that says so. You know, I can put that out there, and I have put that out there. So to me, that is a huge problem. It's mentioned that they try to get us to believe that Miss Williams supports all types of education. She
Right,
has said,
because he said, you know, I don't necessarily support charter schools, but I believe that that students should have a choice. That's what she said when the school board had, before the school board voted. And then you had another person who was on the Zoom meeting. I think it was Jerry Tate or Jeffrey Tate.
Jerry Tate. But
here's,
can I cut you off? Let me cut you off. Can I cut you off? And I don't mean.
Go ahead. Hello, you got the floor. Terri, you got Terri?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I was just saying that's good and well that they say they support all forms of education, right? But what has New Schools or Black Alabamians for Education done for homeschooling? What have they done for private schools? For that matter, what have they done for Birmingham City Schools? That's the question. It's okay that they say for all these different things, And like you said, Jerry Tate says the same thing, but yet in the end, the whole conversation is about charter schools, and all the work and the energy goes towards charter schools. So it's time to stop listening to the words coming out of people's mouths and look at the action that these people and their organizations are taking. What has Black Alabamians for Education done for homeschooling? If they support it, what have they done? Considering in the grant application from New Schools for Alabama, they state that 100% of the Black Alabamians for Education's time will be spent working for them to further charter schools. How can it be said that the work being done by Black Alabamians for Education supports homeschooling and private schooling?
Right. But they say that, we want to give parents a choice of where they want to send their kids to school, but yet the only choice that they're throwing at us is charter schools. So I'm kind of
Exactly.
confused on that route, and that question needs to be asked to them. Is that you say you're for school choice, but right, but but the only thing you're talking about is charter school.
Exactly.
So how can they justify that? That's what I want to know.
And I also want to know how, as an authorizer, which Birmingham City Schools is, which means any charter school that wants to open in Birmingham, they have to come to Birmingham City Schools. And so, Miss Williams, by way of being the District 2 board representative, she is an authorizer, yet she's working for her organization, Black Alabamians for Education, is working for New Schools. New Schools purposefully and willingly brought Freedom Prep to Birmingham. So how can there be an unbiased opinion and vote on the part of a board member about Freedom Prep when the people that are paying her organization is trying to bring them in? They teach these charter school folks how to write an application and how to appeal to the charter school folks, to the boards that are going to be looking at their applications. So they're being trained on how to get past the authorizers. And that's who Black Alabamians are working for, an organization getting paid to get people past the authorizers. And yet, representative from District 2 is an authorizer. Is that making sense?
Yes. So my next question is, wouldn't that consider to be a conflict of interest? You're a school board member that is an authorizer, but you work for an organization that has a charter school agenda, I should put. Don't you think that's a conflict of interest?
I do.
And why? And so why are they letting her get away with that?
Well, I think that, so I have filed a complaint about that with the ethics folks. And we'll see if it gets anywhere. I feel like you do. I feel it's a problem. I wouldn't have filed that if I didn't feel that way. And so now it's just a wait and see. It's a wait and see. I am uncomfortable. I mean, it doesn't matter that she ran against me. She is my representative. I'm in District 2, and she is now my representative. And I have the right to speak out about this. As a board member working for Birmingham AFT, I checked in with the ethics folks before I ever even decided to run to make sure it wouldn't be a conflict. And then once I won and I was on the board, then some of my fellow board members had a problem with it. So they made our lawyer, the board lawyer, do a formal inquiry to make sure that there was no violation. And of course there wasn't. They said all that I could not do as a board member was I could not sit in on the hearings of Birmingham AFT members concerning any disciplinary action or hiring or firing of them. So if a Birmingham AFT member was having a hearing because the board wanted to fire them, I couldn't sit in on it. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't be a part of it. And Richard Franklin, my boss at Birmingham AFT, did an excellent job. And Ms. Parchman with Birmingham City Schools, the lawyer, did an excellent job of isolating me from those incidents. So I had zero ability to have an ethics violation. The ethics people told me what I could and couldn't do. And I made sure that the board lawyer and that my boss understood it. So I never even came close to crossing those lines. But how could those people be concerned about me as a union representative, and yet there's no concern about someone who is getting paid federal grant dollars to teach charter schools how to get past authorizers, and that person is an authorizer? It's an entirely different situation. And to me, it's much more difficult and more damning for a board member to walk that line that Ms. Williams as a District 2 representative is walking. For me, it was simple. It was simple. But I think because of the nature of charter schools and that Birmingham City Schools is an authorizer, I just don't see how you can make any kind of a compromise in that situation. It would mean that Ms. Williams, following the same thought process as the Ethics Commission followed with me, then that would mean that Ms. Williams would not be able to participate in any conversations behind the scenes and from the dais concerning charter schools, and that she would not be able to vote on anything concerning them. And I just don't see those restrictions being put in place. In all fairness, I'm not sure that the Ethics Commission really understood. There's very few people in this state that understand the relationship between nonprofits and authorizers and board members and, you know, the whole thing. And that's why when I filed my complaint, I painted a picture. Now that we've had this vote on freedom prep from Birmingham City School Board, now we know exactly what it looks like and what everybody's job is. And so I was able to paint a picture about every step of the way and the responsibility and the role of everyone in a decision to vote on a charter school. I have a hard problem. I find it difficult to believe that everything that has happened is on the up and up, but it's not my decision. It's not my decision. The law is the law. I'm not a lawyer. And that's why I filed the ethics complaint. And I'm going to let the people that's their thing. They can decide. But I think as a person in District 2, that I was well within my rights to have those concerns. I have knowledge that many people don't have because I've been a board member and I've already had to go through this ethics situation myself. And that's why I did what I did. And I feel that it was necessary.
So you said that Birmingham and Montgomery is a target for charter schools as opposed to maybe Huntsville. Why you think that? Why you believe that that's the case?
Well, like I said, we're the sweet spot. We're 96% Black and brown students, and every school is a Title I school, and that's what they look like. I mean, that's what they look for. That's why, you know, I would challenge you to find a charter school that is predominantly white, that's not in a predominantly Black district. I mean, I just bought a book
that is about Brown versus Board of Education and how charter schools started. And, you know, we have to go back to segregation. That's when this idea came about, was because white folks didn't want to go to school with Black and brown folks. And so that it is the driving factor behind charter schools. And that's why it's rearing its ugly head again, is because, you know, that white folks don't want to go to school with Black and brown folks. We just need to be honest about it. Now, they can point fingers and say, well, Birmingham City Schools is a failing district. Who would want their children to go there? But when I was on the campaign path, when I was out talking to people, white people in District 2, I explained to them that they don't know about Birmingham City Schools till they put their children in it. And so if you want a better school system, enroll your children in Birmingham City Schools and insist on better. That's the only way that Birmingham City Schools is going to get better, is by people enrolling their children, whether it be Black or white, and being involved and demanding better. And as we know, a lot of parents, unfortunately, right now in Birmingham City Schools don't do that for whatever reason. I'm not here to be a judge. I'm not here to solve all the problems. But the truth is the truth, is that in a majority of our schools, there's not an active PTA. There's not active parents. There are some. I don't want to downplay that. We have some wonderful parents, okay? But not on a big enough level that can truly influence the entire district. So if you want change, if you want Birmingham City Schools to be a school system that is good for your child, enroll your child and insist on it. Don't run away from it and go to things like charter schools that only, you know, claim to be public schools when we know in essence they're not.
So at the top of the hour here, we're going to switch gears and talk about privatization a little bit. Terri, I know you have done a wonderful job on privatization, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. You still there, Terri?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
That
I'm
okay.
listening.
Do you believe that now? I mean, I do know. I mean, it's obviously that public schools are under attack. I'm sure you're aware of that, right?
Thank you, baby.
What? First of all, why are you?
Sorry, absolutely. No, see, this is what I've done since 2012. So I accidentally, you know, I always say 3 of my 4 children are teachers. Okay. So this is like in my DNA. My children started coming home telling me stories about what was going on in public education. And it wasn't our experience. I'm like, what are you talking about? I raised my kids in Madison, Alabama in public schools. And once they got their certification and they went to work as teachers in Title I schools, they came home and just sitting around the table, we're all eating dinner, and they would talk about what was happening. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? I don't understand, because that wasn't our experience. And so that's how I got started. I didn't even know if I was a Republican or Democrat. This wasn't about politics. This was about helping students get the highest quality education that they can and that they deserve, and I believe is a civil right. And so as they told me these stories, I started studying, doing my own research, because this conversation did not happen in Alabama about privatization. It wasn't going on. And that's when I discovered the Badass Teacher movement. They started in 2013. And I knew I wasn't alone anymore. They understood. It was already happening in Philadelphia and in Chicago and in Los Angeles and in all of these major urban communities. And so I was able to learn from people that had already experienced it. And I brought it to Alabama, and even my own children, when I started to talk to them as teachers about the privatization movement, They didn't believe me. They just pat me on the, oh, mom, okay, that's cute. But as the years went on, they encouraged me. They said, Mom, you got to keep doing what you're doing because this is a real thing. So now the teachers have known it. Now it's getting real. It's getting to the communities through meetings like the public hearing that we had on Freedom Prep in the last few months. The first one, because they applied to Birmingham City Schools. The second one, Keith, that you were at, that we don't know why they had. And the third one that they just had because they have appealed to the Charter School Commission. So now everyone is starting to really see this in action and understand what's happening. So now people are starting to be like, maybe the fact that you talked about Dr. Bice and the state takeover in 2012, maybe that wasn't so crazy. Maybe these folks have been planning this for years. And now that we've seen the grant application from New Schools for Alabama, we can see that at least Freedom Prep and New Schools have been working on this since 2017 or 18. So these are people that have a lot of patience. And they have a lot of patience because they know in the end, the payoff is going to be huge. And so we really have to understand that we are behind the 8 ball. We are so far behind. But that doesn't mean we don't have power. And that doesn't mean we can't create change. That means, though, that we need numbers. I gave a speech at the NAACP Get Out the Vote meeting yesterday about numbers. We have the numbers if we would all come together and join our voices and say this isn't acceptable. That's what happened with that charter school that I spoke about earlier that has some Turkish relations that people in the county objected to. The charter school had already been approved, but they were able to push and push and push to finally get it rejected. So our voices are important. Just because we have a law doesn't mean we have to bow down to it. Laws don't mean that things are right. And we have an obligation to our children to continue to fight against things that aren't right. And what's happening in public education in Birmingham is not right. I have been saying since 2014, when I came and started working for Birmingham AFT, that people should be out in the streets. They should be marching, they should be protesting, they should be yelling about the quality education that these students are receiving. And I still believe that. I wanted to make a difference as a board member. That's why I ran. And that's what I tried to do for those 4 years. But the truth is that the charter school lobby was too great for me to overcome, and that there's a misunderstanding, there's a miscommunication between the white community and Birmingham City Schools, and they don't understand what the real problems are, and that charter schools like I3 will not overcome the problems that Birmingham City Schools has. And I appreciated there was someone, and Keith, you'll have to remind me of his name. One of the last speakers was someone I think he was a neighborhood officer for either North or South Goodisville.
You're probably referring to Jason Freeman.
Okay, and he spoke and he talked about the community problems and how just changing something from a public school to traditional to a charter school is not addressing those things. And so how will they be successful without addressing that? And I respected that. He's exactly right. Our problems, when you really look at what has happened with our school system, there have been more and more things put in the way to separate communities from schools. And that is the thing that folks try to do if they're going to bring in gentrification. They're going to separate the communities. They're going to make people feel isolated. They're not going to nurture the relationships between community and public schools. And that's exactly what's been happening in Birmingham. The relationship between community and our traditional public schools, neighborhood schools, has broken down. Back in the day, I'm sure y'all can remember this. It was everywhere. Under No Child Left Behind, there were things put in place that were adult education programs. Our schools were there for the community, not just for the children attending. They were there to help adults with their literacy, to help adults with filling out resumes, to help them work through interviews for jobs. They were there to help them with math skills. They were there to help them with workforce development type stuff. It wasn't just a school, it was a community. And so to kill these urban Black communities, to make them more friendly to white folks coming back, they had to break that connection between community and school. And that's exactly what has happened. And we're falling for the rhetoric. If I hear one more time a child should not be punished by their zip code, I'm going to pull my hair out, because it's not the school system that's punishing a child for their zip code. It's the legislators and the laws that they are passing. They are setting those children in those zip codes up for failure so that these folks can come in and save the day. And I just, as a white person, I don't know how to really get that across to both the white community, because I am white. That's my job, I feel, as an anti-racist, is to get white communities to understand their role in all of this. And not only the problem, but in the solution. But yet, I'm embedded in the Black community. I'm an ally to the Black community. And so I want to speak alongside them about the problems in their communities. And it puts me in a really interesting situation. And I want to be as effective as I can be. And that's why I speak out at the public hearings like I do. And that's why I do things like right now. And that's why I appreciate you, Keith, in allowing me to have a platform to put these things out there.
So and to tie into what you're saying, basically making communities where it's predominantly Black or people of color more white friendly. We just cannot just talk about public schools. We also have to talk about public libraries, because public libraries are also being privatized. And I know when I went to school that libraries and schools kind of work hand in hand. And I keep telling these folks at City Hall, for example, that y'all have to get out of this mentality that a library is just about books. And, you know, and it's not. Just like you're saying, a school is just not a place to where a child could get an education.
Yes.
It was a center of learning, not just for kids, but, you know, for adults as well. I remember when I was younger that they had GED programs and workforce development programs for adults. And they used to be at night. They used to be at night. So if you work during the day, you know, back in the day, they call it night school. But it exists.
Yes.
And I wouldn't, and I wouldn't, and this podcast would not be complete if we had a conversation about that from a library advocate. Miss Alice Speake. So I definitely would like to hear from you. I definitely would like to hear from you, Alice, on your work to advocate for public libraries in the greater Birmingham area. So if you will, can you kind of give us up to speed on that? And, you know, with a comment, and my question to you is, Alice, do you believe that public libraries are tied not only to to our community, but it's also tied to education.
Not me.
Let me see. Alice is on mute. So let me see if I can take her off of mute.
Can I say something while you're trying to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you guys work on that. I do want to say this though. I don't find it a coincidence as you know, the mayor, when he was on the school board, was for Birmingham City Schools becoming a conversion charter school district, which basically means he supports privatization. And then he also supported the closing of libraries, which destroys communities in the name of privatization, and the rec centers. I mean, that's everything. Isn't that everything in a community? Your rec center, your library, and your school? I don't find that to be a coincidence. I think very much our communities are under a hostile takeover.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if she unmute herself. Let's see. Hopefully she will. I really would like to hear from her about that. She has done amazing work in terms of saving our libraries in the city of Birmingham, and I really would like to hear from her on that. Alice, are you still there? Okay. She didn't unmute herself, so you know, when she does, we'll get back to that point.
Yeah,
So
she probably needs to log off and come back in a different capacity, maybe.
yeah, probably. But we're talking about privatization of public education, and that public education is under attack. Terri, I don't know if you mentioned why you believe public education is under attack. Did you answer that question? Why you
Well,
believe?
yeah, so I did partially. Like I said, when I first started this in 2012, I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what was wrong. And once I found the badass teachers, I realized I wasn't alone. And when people hear me speak here in Birmingham, one of the first things I usually say is I speak 2 languages. I speak English and I speak privatization. And people kind of laugh, ha ha ha, that's a cute thing to say, but it's the honest to God truth. If you know the language and you know how to do the research, you can find these folks. Like, let's take, for example, the Thursday night meeting. Okay. The charter school public hearing. In it, all of a sudden popped up someone from Breakthrough Birmingham. And so people were shocked. Oh my gosh, Breakthrough Birmingham is for charter schools?
Who is that? Who's that?
Well, they're an organization that is very involved in our summer programming. Okay, and I'm not going to say that they've done a poor job. And that's where I was conflicted as a board member, because I knew Breakthrough Birmingham supported charter schools because I was able to trace who they were, who's on their board and whose board they're on. It's a language and an understanding. When you trace the money, when you look at who's who, when you listen to the language, you can tell. So I had people calling me saying, I'm so upset with Breakthrough Birmingham. And I'm like, I told y'all my first year on the board when we voted on those summer programming, I said, I'm uncomfortable with Breakthrough Birmingham because they are in cahoots with A+, and the Montgomery Ed Foundation and all these other folks that I know were pro charter school. And so sure enough, they finally popped up and said it.
And, I knew that. And the reason I know that they're wanting to privatize public libraries is because the person that works for the city that privatized the business tax section of the finance department in our city used to be the executive director of the only organization in the nation that privatizes public libraries. So these things are not just coincidental. They all come together. They all speak the same language and want the same thing. When Dr. Herring and I first began working together, I told her point blank period, you talk like a privatizer. You're using the exact same language. You talked about things that are part of the privatization movement. And she swore that she wasn't one. But once you look at everything she put in place, you really can't deny that. The whole reason they did the pattern, the feeder patterns, right? You remember that, Keith, when that was a conversation? When we were making the feeder pattern for every high school? That was huge. We went on for months having public comments and hearings about the feeder patterns. And I told everybody right then, I agree we need clean feeder patterns, but not for the same reason. They were doing it. And I want to go on record again for the third time. The reason they want clean feeder patterns is so when they turn, let's take, for example, Ramsey High School. When they turn Ramsey High School into a Southern Research conversion charter school, then they will have a pattern of children to go to it so that they can put them in a pipeline to help UAB. Let's talk about Carver. When they turn Carver into let's go with Bush Hill Academy. They're doing the STEM stuff. Bush Hill feeds into, is it JO?
I think so, yes.
So when you get that clean feeder pattern, then those children will start in elementary school getting the STEM stuff. They'll get the STEM stuff in middle school. Then they'll go on to high school and get their STEM stuff. And it will be all the way through, which sounds amazing and wonderful. But the problem is that they're doing that to feed a pipeline to a corporate sponsor who needs more people to work in that line. So what's wrong with that? I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with that. Talk to the children in Madison and Vestavia and Hoover and all these other predominantly white districts. Do they pipeline those children? No, they don't. They give them all the options and they can decide what's right for them. Here in Birmingham, they're going to pipeline the children into certain jobs. And they're going to make these children and their families feel like they're lucky to be able to become a welder. Look how much money a welder makes. You are blessed. You are so lucky to be able to be a welder and make $80 an hour. You're so blessed to be HVAC and make that kind of money. But the problem is, what if the child's destiny is not to be a welder? What if that child's destiny was to become a doctor? No one in that feeder pattern was programmed to see that that child could be a doctor. We are programming that feeder pattern and all the children in it to be a welder. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying, but in terms of that is concerned, we know that you know every child does not want to go to college, right?
Right.
Um,
That's exactly true, but not every child wants to not go to college and become a welder.
right. So in this case, shouldn't a child have a choice? Once they graduate, which future path
Yes.
that they go to, and I get what you're saying that we shouldn't just push those type of skills like a carpenter or welder. Uh, I understand that. There should be other paths that they can go to. I, um,
Well,
like
these
being a
children have
doctor or being
talents.
a teacher.
Right. Here's the thing is
Something.
that God passes out talents and skills and things equally. God doesn't look at who's black or white or who lives in what zip code. Yet um, the predominantly white systemic monster that is Alabama, they have an opinion. And so they put these children in these pipelines, and the parents feel that their child is lucky to make $80 an hour as a welder. But the truth is, there is as many welders and HVAC and doctors and lawyers and whatever you want to say in Birmingham City Schools as there is in Huntsville. God
Terri,
passes that out equally. God does not choose. He passes these things out, and we all have a natural ability. And I don't believe in narrowing a high poverty student or a black or a brown student's ability to become something based on what the market needs. It should
I
be
got a story.
based on that child's skills and interests. And in our Black communities and our high poverty communities in Alabama, they don't nurture that. They don't believe that. And that's a huge part of what's wrong with Birmingham City Schools, because our public school system in Alabama believes that high poverty Black students and brown students should be in a certain pipeline, and that the white affluent children in Huntsville should be in another pipeline. They get it handed to them. And that's just wrong. We have an equal opportunity problem.
But
Our
then
children,
I got a
yes.
story for you. And
Okay.
this is what happened to me when I was in school. So here it is, and this is a story I have not told in about 30 years. So here it is. So basically, growing up, I had, a reading problem, and which eventually became a learning disability. And it wasn't all that bad as people uh, thought it was. So they did. They just threw me right in special education. They said, okay, I'm Black. I got this problem. I really don't want to deal with it. Let's just throw him in special education. And I've been there for quite some time. But I knew within myself, I knew what I wanted to be. I knew what I wanted to become. And at that time, I wanted to go into business. I wanted to learn about business. I wanted to learn about entrepreneurship. And they said, well, no, that's not a realistic career choice for you. Maybe you should do, X, Y, and Z. But I was determined. I was like, no, this that's not what I want to be. I told them what I wanted to be. I told them what I, wanted to do, but they kept shoving that pipeline, as you were
Mhm.
saying, Terri, and they did not nurture,
Nope.
what I wanted to do. So
And
I began to act out.
Mhm.
I began to act out. I began to rebel against the system until they finally realized, okay, we're going to give Keith a chance.
Mhm.
So when they did give me a chance, not only did I excel in regular academics in middle school and in high school, but I far surpassed some of the most prominent peers that people were saying, they're doing so well, they're gonna get into a fine college. I surpassed some of them.
Mhm.
Thing is about me is
Yep.
that I had to do 4 years of high school in 2 years because I got out of the special education program when I was an actual junior in high school. So I had my academics to worry about, and I was involved in a lot of clubs and activities when I was in high school. And then I held a full-time job. But here's what happened though. Several things happened. Number one, I was invited to join the academic board, be a part of the math club. I was nominated to be on the National Honor Society. I missed it by 2 spots, but I was so close. And when I graduated high school in 1992, we had about 500 students that graduated that year at Parker High School. That's considered to be the largest class in the history of any high school in the city of Birmingham. And guess what number or rank that I fall under those 500 students?
I don't know.
13.
Wow.
And I'm a twin, and I beat out my own twin brother. I was number 13, he was number 14.
Wow.
You know, even though he was on the SECME program, even though he was on the National Honor Society, at the end of the day, when I graduated, I even beat him out with all of his achievements and all his grand, confetti. I beat him out and got accepted to more schools and obtained more scholarships and money than he did.
Yep.
So in other words, I'm here to tell you that I beat the pipeline. They told me that I, should be one thing. I really pull a number on them.
Yep.
I fooled them. And this is something that I mentioned a couple of months ago when I was invited to participate in a forum at Parker High School. And I decided then to tell my story and say that what people believe they think they know who you are and what's best for you, that does not define you. Only you can define you. If you know what you want, you go after it. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't, and don't let anyone stick you in a pipeline.
Right.
That's what they try to do to me. Try to stick me in a pipeline. But I defeated the odds. Ended up being in the military, served my country. Was in the 95 percentile for the ASVAB test when I joined the Army. The top percentage in the U.S. Army. And I was like, well, they was like, are you sure you had a learning disability? Yes, I did. But through hard work and by the grace of God, I prevailed. An education system that did not nurture who I wanted to be. Instead, they wanted to shove a pipeline down my throat. So I took that pipeline out of my mouth and told them what they can do with it. Because what they said that I should be does not define me.
Right.
And see, this is what was happening to certain Black and brown students back in the 80s and 90s in Birmingham public schools. I can imagine now that it's probably worse now than it was back then. But I'm a living proof that you don't have to accept who other people say you are, and you don't have to bow down to whatever pipeline that they try to shove down your throat. You have control over who you want to be. And get rid of those folks, those naysayers that said, no, you can't. And get behind and find some folks that said that they will. And the problem that I have with that in terms of charter schools is that they're using that and say, okay, this is what we're gonna promise. But here's the thing, and even with Freedom Prep, they have not demonstrated not one thing that they are promising the Tizville community if that school should ever be there. No evidence. All they had was statistics about Birmingham City schools that said that signifies that, hey, Birmingham is a failing school district, and they're using these numbers to paint a false narrative to say, hey, we can fix this. And all of the time they was talking about what was going on in Memphis. Sir, ma'am, this is not Memphis, Tennessee. We are in Birmingham, Alabama. Things work a little different here. So we got laws that are in relation to charter schools that are different than those that are in Tennessee. And I don't think they are looking at that. All they want to know, all they want to do is that, first of all, they don't want to listen to nothing the community has to say, because they basically say, well, y'all stupid, y'all dumb, y'all don't know what's best for your own community. I got a news flash for you. You don't know what's best for Tennisville. Why? Because you don't live here. If you live in Tennisville for 20, 30, and 40 years, then you can tell me something. Until then, butt out.
Nope.
Shut up. Go somewhere else. Go back to Memphis even. I don't care. It just really burns me up that you have those type of, people. And I don't think they realize just how much of a consequence that is going to be. But because people don't live in a certain area, they'll be like, well, I don't care because I don't live here. You can't have, that attitude. That's just like me saying, okay, pollution is bad in North Birmingham, but because I don't live there, I shouldn't care. That is the wrong attitude. That's the wrong way of thinking. If you say that you care about people, it does not matter where they live. You should be concerned. And in terms of education is concerned, if they are talking about, having choices for parents and students, shouldn't public education be a part of that choice instead of only talking about just charter schools? That don't sound like choice to me. What do you think, Terri?
Yeah, no, and that's a point that I made the other night and I make quite often is that, and I've learned this language through Journey for Justice, a national organization that, works really hard for our traditional public schools. They're up in Chicago. G2 Brown, I've had him here several times talking to the community, is that what they're talking about is an illusion of choice. It's not really a choice, because what we're ignoring is that our Black and our brown students, our high poverty students, are being denied the very first choice that is so basic to our white children and to our affluent children, and that's to have a high performing neighborhood public school. It's like, let's just skip over the fact that Alabama refuses to fund our schools equitably. I mean, that right there puts our high poverty students at a disadvantage. But hey, we're not going to fix that. We're not even going to talk about it. No, let's go talk about how you're being denied an education because your zip code and this charter school is going to be different. Well, who's going to allow that charter school to be there? That same power structure that's denying that school system equitable funding. So it's an illusion of choice, because they don't really have, even with the charter school, they don't really have the choices that the predominantly white and the non-poverty communities have, which is the very thing that they're touting that they do, is provide those choices. And so we have our power structure, our elected officials denying our Black and brown communities and our high poverty communities certain things. And yet we believe that they're going to pass a law like the voucher law called the Accountability Act, or the charter school law, that all of a sudden these things are going to provide equity. What? If they're that concerned about equity, then provide a different funding for our public schools that will provide equity. Don't put another useless law on top of what we're trying to do in public education. So not only do you refuse to fund us equitably, but now you're going to allow funds to be taken away from those schools through vouchers. And oh, wait a minute, we're not done yet. Now let's have charter schools where we're going to have more funds taken away from these schools we refuse to fund equitably. That's the real conversation. That's why we say this is an illusion. And like I said earlier, I used to make the mistake that everyone that supports charter schools can see that and understand that and promotes that flawed idea. But the truth is, not everyone does understand it. And so I've been trying to take a little bit gentler attitude and more of an informative attitude to make people really understand that I, I understand that you feel that a charter school is going to give your child what they need to succeed. But let's look at what's really behind it. We're all really on the same side that truly believe in a high quality, equitable education for all students. We're truly on the same side. The thing is once you put this evidence out there and those folks continue to push the charter schools, then you know that they just simply don't want equitable schools. What they want is a better school for just their child. And or they just want to make money off of the children.
And they're using they're collecting data, they're putting statistics together, they're using the fact that a Black and brown neighborhood is impoverished, and they're using this to get grants, and it's not serving that particular neighborhood. That's basically what it is. And I'm gonna say something else too, and this is something that I told one of the neighborhood officers. Now that's that empty building that Our Lady of Fatima Church has been sitting for quite some time. Now I know they talk about, we want's best, for our kids. So when they say our kids, they basically talking about, the people that go there, right? They're not even talking about the community itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first mistake they made. Second mistake, they made is that they admitted that that building that used to be a private school owned by the church, they just want to get rid of it, or they just want it to be occupied so they can have a stream of income coming in.
Right.
That's basically what it is. It is those two things. Number one, they're not concerned about the quality of education for the people that actually live here. They're not only concerned about the education of the kids that go to their church, but they want some money in their pocket by having Freedom Prep to come over in that school.
Right.
Now I know that really brought the house down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right.
At that public hearing, but that's the truth. That is the God honest truth. And I mean, it's bad that when people lie, but when you go into the house of God, the house of the Lord, and you lie, it just makes it a whole lot, worse, because that means you don't have it. No matter where you go, everything you come out of your mouth, you can't be trusted, and you have no integrity. And Ron Bales from TDC, when he was talking about, the accountability and all that Freedom Prep, I know that was geared towards me. But the fact of the matter is that, again, he does not live here. So he has no idea what goes on a daily basis here in the Tisville community. And that's the whole point that I am driving home, with. You're using our community as a pawn to put money in your pocket, and it's not going to benefit the people that actually live here. That is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we will hold y'all accountable.
And here's the thing. If charter schools are so amazing and wonderful and successful, it wouldn't be this kind of battle over it. They would be able to do more of their work up front and transparently, but they don't. They're not transparent. So much of their work is behind the scenes, and the community is the last to know. So after 20 or 30 years of this charter school model, there should be a plethora of data to prove that charter schools are successful. And the honest God truth is that data is not there because they're not more successful. You will have one here or there. I'm not saying that everyone is terrible, but what I tell people is that charter schools are only as strong as the law that created them. And in Alabama, our charter school law is full of holes and it's full of loopholes. It's terrible. It's written terribly. And that's why there are lawsuits trying to get the local funding, because that law was written so terribly. The accountability that everybody says is there is smoke and mirrors. No charter school in Alabama ever has to be closed. There is nothing saying a charter school has to be closed, and people need to understand that. They lead people to believe differently. So what I, again, trying to take a gentler approach to it, is that there's people that just don't understand. And I that's why this platform is so important. And that's why we need more platforms like this to get the information out there, because I, for one, truly believe in Birmingham City Schools. And I want Birmingham City Schools to perform at its highest level. And the only way that that is going to happen on a large scale, the only way that's going to happen is if the Department of Education and our legislature and our folks over the mountain stop targeting us and they begin listening to what it is that we need. We cannot overlook the fact that when we were under state takeover, Dr. Bice and Dr. Richardson performed an illegal reduction in force. Richard Franklin, the president of Birmingham AFT, stood there and told them it was illegal. The law is very specific. What they did was illegal. And indeed, that lawsuit still continues to today. And the state has been given, they have been allowed, the state, to step out of it. So the State Department of Ed that caused this whole problem has been allowed to leave the lawsuit. So now it's Birmingham City Schools versus the state, the judicial system. And the thing is that the board under Dr. Bice voted against the reduction in force. The board tried to do the right thing, but Dr. Bice overruled them and did the reduction of force anyway. We can't forget that, because if Dr. Richardson and Dr. Bice don't know how to do a legal reduction of force, we're in trouble. I mean, what? It's pretty apparent under the state takeover that a lot of things were done that destroyed certain departments in our school system.
So why we're not having a conversation about how can we improve Birmingham City Schools?
I think a lot of it is because people don't like the answer, because it's a long term. These problems didn't happen overnight. There are layers and layers and layers of problems that have happened over time. And so there's no magic bullet. There's nothing that's going to fix our schools completely. And, and I understand, we all have to understand that parents that have children going to school right now put their child above all. And I can't say that I blame them for that. And so these parents a lot of times don't want to put the work in and say, well, we're going to work hard and in 4 years or 5 years or 10 years, the school system's going to be great. No, they want change now. And I get it. I really do. But those parents are going to have to do whatever those parents have to do. The board, the superintendent, and his cabinet need to do whatever it is to improve these schools, even if it means it's going to take 5 or 10 years. Because in the end, that's the right thing to do. We can't keep bringing on new gadgets and curriculum and programs and nonprofits and things like that to fix us, when what is wrong with us is societal problems. It's, it's poverty, it's violence, it's, trauma. It is so complex what's wrong with our school system, and a charter school coming in doing the same damn thing we're doing is not going to produce any different results. And if they say they are, then, like you said, there's
Red
probably
flag.
some
Red
games
flag.
being played. Now, I will say this, and I wish that we could have had a back and forth at that Thursday meeting, because one thing one of the pro charter school people was saying was about the smaller class sizes. Well, who in the hell's problem is it that we in public education don't have smaller class sizes? It is our legislators, because they provide the funding for a unit. A unit is a term for a counselor, for a teacher. That's the way they refer to it. Our state, our legislators, the law, Alabama code provides for a certain amount of money for every unit. So they provide X amount of units. That causes us to have higher numbers of students in a class. Now, what we can do is take the general fund and hire more teachers using our general fund so that we could have smaller class sizes. But to base people's salaries on something like our general fund is very scary, because that general fund.
But they're not even talking about that. They're not talking about that. And a lot of your Republican candidates say, okay, we need to fix education, right? First of all, they don't have a plan. Second of all, if you're saying that we should take money out of the general fund to do it, that's obviously not a priority for them. Do you know what they're doing?
Right.
Governor Ivey has taken $135 million out of the general fund to push her plan to build 3 private prisons. One of them is somewhere in Elmore County in the Montgomery area, and took another $400 million from the American Rescue Care Plan Act money that they received to build 3 new prisons. So if they're talking about fixing the education system, I have to ask, how in the hell is that fixing an education system?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we need to, this is a complicated issue and we need to understand it. So there's 2 budgets in Alabama. Not every state has 2 like we do. We do. We have the general budget and we have the Education Trust Fund, the ETF. Now, the thing to understand is that funding for schools is in our state constitution. It's based off of property taxes. They created this in like 1901. Okay, so the ETF is what's supposed to go towards education, but taxes and the money they're bringing in over all of this time has gotten so large that they're like, some people are trying to blend the Education Trust Fund into the general fund so they can start taking that money. And other people just put pork into those things they're asking out of the Education Trust Fund to fund things that should be funded out of the general fund. Okay. So there's 2 different things going on. And then it gets more complicated, because supposedly they wanted to correct the fact that, the Education Trust Fund, wasn't, back then, we're talking in the past, was not providing equity, and they wanted equity. So they brought in the foundation program. The foundation program is what funds our teachers. They're the ones that say you should have one teacher for every 15 students in elementary school. So that's what we're going to give you money for. You tell us how many kids you have in, elementary school, and we will tell you how many teachers we're going to fund. Well, the problem is that they will fund one for every 15. But if you have more students, then you've got to come up with your own money, or else you have to have large class sizes. And that's why we end up with 30 kids in one class, and Vestavia doesn't, because they have the money out of their general fund to pay for more teachers. So we are equal. The Education Trust Fund will fund our schools equally. But what it was built to do was to bring that equity. The truth is, Birmingham City Schools should be given more money for teachers than Vestavia gets. That is what equity is.
Because Birmingham is a larger school district than is Vestavia. Is that correct?
No, it's not just about size. Because if you look at size, it appears that we get a lot more money per student than some of these other school systems. But here's where the equity comes in. To give students the ability to perform at their highest level, it's going to cost differently. Like for a English as a second language student, to help them perform at their highest level, they need more resources. For a special needs student to perform at their highest level, they need more resources. Even for a high poverty student to perform at their highest level, it takes more resources. So when you fund equally, when you are equally funding Vestavia and Birmingham, then that's not equity, because it costs more to educate our children, because we have more special needs students, we have more ESL students, we have more high poverty students. So to fund schools equally is not what we need. We need equitable, which means that Birmingham City Schools would get more of the state funding of the Education Trust Fund, of the foundation program. We would get more than school systems with fewer special needs. And that is the sole problem in Alabama, is that our legislators won't even touch on it. Have you ever heard a conversation, Keith, about this?
No.
No, you haven't. Because they want to pretend it doesn't exist. And then if you say you need to do
Just
this,
like
they say,
CTR, just like the governor is
Mhm.
prancing around the state saying that we ban CTR in public schools.
exactly.
You
And it
you
doesn't
uh
even
you
exist.
basically created an issue that does not exist. Have you
Right.
have you ever watched this movie called Galaxy of Terror?
I don't think so.
It was released back in 1981. And what happened was that you had 5 people that was lured to, this planet. It was a far planet in a far galaxy. Want to know how all of them got killed?
How?
It was because of something that they had created in their own mind that did not exist in the real world. That's how they was killed. And so you're
Wow.
having the same thing that goes on
Mhm.
here. You're creating an issue
Yep.
that does not exist.
Yes. And
CRT has never been taught,
no,
in public school, and you're banning something that does not exist.
it doesn't exist. And, so much of the conversation on the privatization of education just doesn't exist. Like, okay, so now they're testing our children to death. They're collecting all this data. I challenge anyone to tell me what has changed in public education since we've had that data. How has it helped?
Right, we have the data. But what
Mhm.
are they doing with it? That's the question.
Well, the
Now,
truth is, this data will not save us. This data will not help us educate our children. What will help us educate our children? Our teachers teaching. And this phony idea, how will we know if the teachers are teaching? That's just such an incredibly ignorant and naive comment to make, because when we all went through school, there wasn't all this data and testing, and yet we got an education. We put men on the moon. We have incredible 90% of our population goes to public education. And so we have created the thinkers and the movers and the entrepreneurs, and we have created all that. We educated all that in public education. And all of a sudden, public education is broke. Somebody make sense of it. See, that's the thing, is that these privatizers, these folks that want to make money off of our children, have done a very successful job. And my husband won't like me to say this, but since Reagan's days, when he was president, is when it kind of started. We've created this narrative that our public education is broken. But that's all it is an empty narrative backed by false data. And
I say all the time that, even though you got this data, you got this statistics, that numbers can be manipulated and it can be skewed
yeah.
to form a narrative that can be misleading,
Mhm.
misinformative, and dishonest.
Mhm.
I say that all the time.
Mhm. Well, and so when you look at standardized testing, it's been proven to be biased. It is biased. It leans towards white students and towards non-poverty students. And so to create the Accountability Act, which judges our schools on test scores, is to automatically ensure that our high poverty students and our Black and brown students will be the ones in the failing schools. And this is one issue I had ever since day one. I've known Miss Williams from District 2 since 2015. We've not had conversations, but we know exactly where each other stands by the camps that we are in. And she touts the Accountability Act as being very pro our Black and brown communities and our high poverty community. But I say this, when you are basing the label of a failing school on a standardized test that is biased against a certain community or communities, then how can you support it? When you have 96% of the failing schools being Black and brown students, to me, it's obvious that the system is broken and that they're targeting Black and brown students. Because if it were only about poverty, then we would have far more white students in those failing schools. And the truth is that we don't. We have
Because we
many
have white
high
people,
poverty.
because we have white people. So it's not just Black and brown people that are
Mhm.
dealing in poverty. We got white people that are dealing in poverty,
Yes.
as
And,
well.
and so if I can talk about one more technical issue really quickly, because I want people to understand really how complex this is. Back in the day, there was free and reduced lunch, and you had to show that you were eligible for free and reduced lunch. We're all familiar with that. That made it very easy for the government, the state school system, to know the economic background of the students in any given school. Well, now that there's programs to where entire districts eat free, like what Huntsville does, what Birmingham does, then it's harder to track the actual economic background of these students. So what I tried to do is I actually broke down every school on the failing school list And I looked at the economic status of it, and I came to my own conclusion, also looking at the report card, the A and the F schools. And it appeared to me that approximately half of the high poverty students were white. But I never, ever put data out there that I haven't had confirmed. Just my, unscientific looking through crap is not good enough. I would never put that out there. So what I did was I wrote to the State Department of Education, and I still have the emails. I wrote to the department that's in charge of this, and I said, listen, things have changed and I'm confused. He said, I understand. He explained it to me. I said, okay, well, by what you're telling me, I've broken it down. And to my knowledge, approximately half of the students in public education in Alabama are white. Is that accurate? And he said, yes, that is my same conclusion. You would be accurate to say that. Now, we could say it's plus or minus 5%. I don't care. Give it plus or minus 20%. It still doesn't make any sense that 96% of the students that are in a failing school are Black or brown. It just doesn't, because we do have a high number of white, high poverty students in our school systems. And so it's very evident to me. And I feel like the only people that believe that 96% of the schools that are failing are Black and brown are people that believe our Black and brown students aren't capable. They either believe they're not capable or they believe they're not valuable. And that's why it shocks me when Black folks and brown folks talk about the success of the Accountability Act. I still can't wrap my brain around it. And I try to correct people every time they use the word failing. Because when you call a school failing, you're calling those students failing. And I can't get on board with that. We have as many students in Birmingham capable of being doctors or lawyers or welders or entrepreneurs or any label. We have as many in Birmingham as capable of doing that as we do in Huntsville. So why do we not treat the school system like that? Why do we not give these students the resources they need to have those equal opportunities? We have an opportunity gap. We don't have a testing gap or a knowledge gap. We have an opportunity gap. And it's time that people really start hearing that message and wrapping their brain around it. But the other message, students shouldn't be punished by their zip code, is so easy to grab onto. It's catchy, it makes sense. You can say it's a civil rights issue, which quality education is civil rights, but that doesn't mean because they use those words that they're right. They're manipulating it. They're using it to touch on people's heartstrings. And the truth is that students in Birmingham City Schools have been denied a high quality education by the powers that be in our legislature and in the Department of Education and by the state school board. It's really that easy. If that's why I said the other night that what we need is for the foundations, the elected officials, and new schools for Alabama to get their knees off of our children's throats and allow us to educate them, because we know how to do it. Birmingham City Schools once was a strong school system. But after years and years and years of things happening to us and resources not being provided, it's caught up with us. And I understand why parents are running to charter schools. I do. I understand it, but that doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that's a solution.
We are going to get ready to close soon, but hopefully I can get Alice Speake on the floor to give an update on her fight to save the libraries in the city of Birmingham. Hopefully I can get a hold of her.
Hey,
Yay!
can y'all hear me? Okay.
Stranger,
Yeah, sorry
floor
about
is
earlier.
yours.
I was preoccupied for just a
You
moment.
should have cut me off a long time ago. Have you been sitting there waiting? I'm so sorry. I thought I was filling space.
No, it's fine. I want to listen to everything. So, I mean, it's probably, I should set more boundaries and time myself, but no, I just, so I'm glad that you let me have the opportunity to talk a little bit about it. There's not really a lot of new things to bring up. The budget proposal, is coming later in the year. So, I mean, by year, I mean, possibly within the next 30 days, maybe longer. Because of the World Games, and there may be a caveat or something about, well, because of World Games and all this production, all this planning, that they may delay talk and committees on the budget, but I don't know if it'll be that delayed. But regardless, I really just feel like I should keep the reminder out about the budget proposal coming and whether that budget will have the $18 million as requested by the library board to be able to fund everything they need. So the $18 million is the projection that they've given to the city. They've also made a report to the finance department. So there shouldn't be any, that should be entirely clear on the city's end, like what the libraries have specifically requested, and a breakdown by neighborhood branch and with payroll and materials and other upkeep, things like utility costs and all that. So in other words, if this stuff comes up, or if the council or the city still aren't sure exactly the breakdown, they should definitely have exactly what they need at this point, definitely by this point. So the $18 million should be met in the budget. And if it's not, there's a little bit of time between the proposal and when it's passed. And I want to make sure everybody's aware of that time period, which should be sometime between mid-May and June. We don't really know the exact dates yet. But just so everyone's aware, it's really not clear what the budget will be for the library specifically. It's also strange that the libraries that, despite having work orders placed for them, are still not repaired. There's no update on those. But yeah, so I guess the update is really like, there's not really a lot to update people about, just making sure everyone knows that it's not a done deal. It's not a guarantee. That library board has made very clear what they need from the city exactly. So that shouldn't be up for that shouldn't be a guess. That shouldn't be something that the counselors can say they don't know anything about when the time comes, as opposed to previous years. So
there's still a conversation about certain libraries in the city up to being closed. Is there any conversation about that?
The board has stated that until they really have their budget proposal, the city's budget proposal, they can't even move forward on that discussion. So they are tabling all that discussion still. They had a long range planning committee meeting that basically stated until that budget proposal comes out, they're at a standstill on discussing in any committee or in general board meetings what they'll be doing with the actual physical locations.
Because one thing that was brought to my attention about one of the libraries, Tyersville Library in particular, is that Councilor Krista Smithman keeps saying that Tyersville Library has foundation problems, which I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my brain about that. Now that building, the new building, was built in the late 90s. And here we are in 2022, which is a little bit over 20 years. Now I would think that if that building had a foundation problem, that building would not be standing today. So I'm just having a hard time wrapping my brain, around it, because anybody who just know for sure if that library has any foundation problems, if they have sent a city inspector to do it, but a city councilor cannot do that. That request will have to be made to the mayor. So I'm kind of disturbed that that would even come out of her mouth without any proof that, that that is the case. Your thoughts on that, Alice?
Yeah, I do find that really strange as well, considering it hasn't been a focus of any of the board meetings. You can look back in the meeting minutes recorded, which are recorded fairly fairly quickly, like within the week of the meetings occurring. And you can go back and see like if they've ever mentioned anything about the Titusville Foundation, and that should give you that should be the most accurate info to work with, because they usually do talk about the building status and like what they need at least at some point, and there hasn't been anything recent about Titusville especially. And then we also have the branch manager there who is doing a ton of work, who just in the past board meeting made a presentation about all the Titusville events and accomplishments that they have held over time, that they've got a lot of advertising out, a lot of attendance, an uptick in traffic and just engagement. So that to me is a good sign that it isn't something that it doesn't seem like the foundation is a priority issue. It's not something talked about. And if it were, I would suspect, and I can't say this because I don't know exactly, but I would suspect that if the branch manager understood this about their own building, that it would be something they would talk about, but it's not something they talk about.
I mean, so that's what's so, confusing about this whole thing. If the board is not, if the board is not having a conversation about that, then where is that coming? What is that coming from, and why bring that up? I understand about, I think it's Inslee library being closed because there has been evidence of work that needs to be done there. But as far as Titusville Library, I don't, I just don't see it, unless it's something that, that we're not being told. I cannot confirm that what these folks are saying are the absolute truth. And second of all, I don't understand, other than what Mayor Whitman had put out there, the reason why there's too many libraries in the city of Birmingham, and some of them need to close proportion to other cities with the same population as the city of Birmingham. I'm having a hard time with that. Thirdly, I'm having a hard time, believing that the mentality that libraries are always about, books, and that it sounds like to me that the city of Birmingham is trying to skip out on this responsibility to fund libraries, specifically with some of the questions that they was asking, me and other candidates to be on the library board. And one of the things they was talking about, is funding. And I made it perfectly clear that the city should not skip out on this responsibility to fund libraries. And I don't know what city in America that does not fund libraries.
Leeds. Leeds, Alabama.
Leeds, Alabama don't fund their libraries.
Yeah, there was a scandal recently, or maybe not scandal, I couldn't call it big enough to be a scandal, but they denied funding to the library directly after something could have been passed, but it didn't. So it happens. For smaller towns, they can usually use some kind of excuse of either COVID now, or just, oh, we think we should spend this somewhere else, and it's not as challenged. And I just happen to know that about Leeds in particular. So we don't want to be Leeds though, at all. So and Leeds only has one library, and they don't even want to refund that. I do want to, because I remember now, there's the presentation they made in December. Titusville wasn't even, I don't believe the Titusville Library was mentioned when they talked about the buildings that needed repairs, which at the time was still in Ensley, which is still the case, and then East Lake. Yeah, it does seem that if the city wanted to, and I mean the mayor or the financial officers, if they saw an opportunity to cut here, with the promise of some other service that could supposedly supplant it later, that they would do so. I really just wish people would not sleep on it, especially with these board meetings. Again, they're kind of at a standstill. So services that libraries could pivot to, things that are less, perhaps less book based, or just kind of expanding their collections in other ways. That conversation, those should be prepared ahead of time. But at the moment, like, talking about that is a little putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit. So I would love for the library board meetings to be more accessible to a lot more people, because what I've seen over and over again is a lot of focus on the central location, the one downtown, which is the largest one, and mostly talking about libraries as a venue. Now they had the novel tasting event, which was really successful for them. They had a lot of tens of thousands of dollars in sponsorship deals, and the businesses really supported it. People came out. It was expected to, happen again in a frequent cadence. I don't know if they're prepared to do that. It seemed like it was a big event to organize and to maintain for them, but more things like that, they're encouraged to do. But it does seem to be that there's mainly a focus on the buildings being used as venues for other things, and not trying to diminish, what libraries do or what the Central Library does. It's not simply a venue space, but there was a committee meeting with Jermaine Johnson, who is now on the board, Funny Man, and he suggested that there be, that there be like an event or entertainment network to keep talent in Birmingham, entertainers, comedians like himself, musicians, artists, and use the Central Library, use the libraries, but mostly talked about Central as a hub for people to network and be able to do work out of. And that's great. That's exactly what other cities do, and what you can use libraries for, doing things as a networking place that also doesn't interfere with their daily operations or with their daily programs. So it seems like with Jermaine on the board, that's something that he will be bringing to it, what he thinks would be good for the talent of the city. But I feel, without the budget being laid out, without that being a guarantee, we can't even start picking what things really should be improved yet. We already know that there are things that need to be improved in libraries in general, which is mostly disability access. And then hours of operation. There's actually a library that they call it ghost libraries, which I really don't like the name ghost libraries, just because it doesn't really fully describe what it is. But essentially it's terminal check-ins that are, automatic, like you can check things out yourself. But the advantage for that is right now libraries close at about 6 o'clock. More people would be using libraries if they're open a little bit later. A lot of people get off work at 5 or 6. The time they take to travel to get to one, or pick their kids up from school after care and then get to the library. I see it all the time at the library I work at, where parents and kids are coming in right before they close and trying to do what they can in the 10 minutes they have until the computer shut down or something. Introducing
That's
a
another
terminal.
conversation.
Sorry?
That's another conversation that need we have the correlation between libraries and education.
Right.
Is there a correlation between public libraries and education?
Um, Absolutely. And it's if we had libraries open for families at times in which families could actually get to them, that could be a game changer. And libraries will curate their collections based on what schools materials or school curriculum are. So, back in the 2000s, there were tons of these little juvenile nonfiction books series that came out that were just very short, brief autobiographical or informational things on like technology, budding technology at the time of the 2000s or something, computers, coding, and there's always like a little bitty book about them, or a little bitty book about like particular historical figures. Well, all that stuff gets updated, over time, and schools don't use the same material sometimes from, the 2000s. And when these certain editions have been circulating before, they're pivoting to new things or new topics or new historical figures. A shift is somewhere is shifting, and the libraries reflect that. So it's a direct line to education, to children's education, and they do that intentionally.
So is that something that is still going on now, and that should libraries be like continue or have this correlation with students who attend public school?
Should they have this correlation, this relationship?
Yes.
Yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer, to have full access, longer access, to materials that you're going to be using. So that's kind of I'm kind of subtweeting there the idea that libraries are out of date, or they don't have the same material, have material that we need. It's like, well, no, they manage themselves, and it's reflecting what the current markets are and what the current school curriculums are. So they know what's trending. All of that stuff is part of their book research. They specifically, they know what to single out. They know what to generally have in their database, what to catalog. They may not have all the time in the world to really go in depth and clean out the catalog and recatalog things or something. But with COVID, that actually became one of the bigger tasks that libraries could do, which was, since they had fewer people coming in, they had more time to weed shelves. They had more time to catalog, had more time to recatalog things. Sometimes libraries it depends on the library, they'll catalog something differently from each building, just so they know, just if they think that it'll be circulated differently, be checked out differently if it's in one section versus another. Things like that are all just that management, and that work goes into just getting patrons aware of what's there, making it more accessible. And that's all kind of the invisible labor of libraries that I guess, before you work in a library, you don't realize how much of that time that takes. So that's, again, another reason why you can't just cut off payroll or reduce employees, because you're reducing that really good work that needs to be done to maintain the libraries fairly and to keep the curriculum fresh and up to date.
Okay, we are getting ready to close pretty soon, and we're gonna have some last words from Terri, Michal first, and then Alice Speake. So Terri, what is your last word for this podcast?
Hey there. Well, first of all, I want to apologize. I really appreciate that work Alice does. And I thought I was just filling space while she tried to get logged in to where we could hear her. So I apologize for monopolizing the time. What Alice brings to the table is very important. And what she's saying about, the libraries and our public schools is exactly right. I mean, these are not separate issues. A great way to destroy a community is alienate our schools, close the public libraries and the rec centers. And those are the exact areas that are being targeted by this city's administration. And even though some people may feel libraries are outdated, she made very excellent points about how, especially in our communities and in high poverty communities, they're still a lifeblood. So I really appreciate that, Alice, and everything you bring to the table. So I'll just say this, when it comes to the privatization of our public schools, I think that it's a complex issue. They purposefully make complex, but really when it comes down to it, it's kind of a no duh. We need to let our teachers teach, and we need to really look at the data and what's going on in our schools and understand how much of the data is false and how much of our schools problems are actually community problems. If we can get the buy-in from the community, if we can start serving the community and having them participate in the things that our public schools are doing, that will build stronger schools. I always say strong communities have strong schools have strong communities. And until the city is ready to really cement those relationships again, like they were in the past, we're going to continue this struggle. And our charter schools will struggle in the same way. The thing is that they'll be opening and closing and opening and closing. And public schools can't do that. So, the folks are just going to continue making money off of our children, and the quality of education overall in Birmingham will not improve. So thank you, Keith, for allowing me to have this platform and put that information out there. I just look forward to doing that more and more. I feel that the community is now really ready to hear this and to begin participating in actions against these charter schools. And I'm just really excited to hear that. So thank you, Keith. And thank you, Alice, for the information you brought as well. And I do apologize.
Last words, if you have any, Alice.
Yeah, well, no apology needed. Like I said, I needed to set a boundary of my own time. I can get caught up listening and absorbing things. So I still appreciate everything, like your expertise, your history in the city, and what you talk about. So I'm partly to blame for that, but for going over time. But I do want to end this with just a reminder that the Birmingham Library has specifically requested to be refunded to $18 million, where they are currently at $13 million, to recover staff. The city's budget proposal is not ready yet. It should be ready in May later. And the education committee, those are made of city councilors, and they are the new elected Jonathan T. Moore, JT Moore is the chair. And then we have Darrell O'Quinn and Clinton Woods. Those two, of course, have been on the council a little longer. And basically, I just want people to know that those are the ones in the education committee who have the most engagement, direct engagement with the libraries. And if people have any questions or concerns that, about budgeting for libraries or any other, or work orders and such like that, you can reach out to the board, or equally to the education committee, because they at least should be able to answer some of those questions, and definitely know that their community wants to be updated on those events as much as possible. So if you haven't reached out to them, it would be great to do so.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and spending your Sunday evening here with us, with this great wealth of knowledge here, which is really needs to be said, because a lot of times you can't get this information on any other type of platform. Just be honest. just to be honest with you, you're not going to, especially on traditional media where they're not even talking about public education and libraries and privatization and things of those nature. You're not going to get that. So I decided to return to podcasting because people need a platform where these things can come out, that people need to know the absolute truth about issues that they really care about. And so that's why we have programs such as this. And we invite people, not per se your politicians or those that are in a position of power per se, but the people who are actually boots on the ground. I believe those are the ones that carry the truth, the true information about what really going on, because every day that's what they're dealing with. And a platform like this is where it's going to be if it's not going to be anywhere else. So ladies, thank you so much. And we're going to close out here. Again, keep in mind tomorrow we have a great announcement for you tomorrow. And this is concerning our continuing coverage of the 2022 midterm elections. We got a primary that's coming up on May 24th, which is roughly about 23 days from now. And so we will have an announcement about that on tomorrow morning. So stay glued to your Facebook timeline for that announcement. And we will continue to have information sessions like this on a number of topics, not just public education or privatization, but we're going to have other tough conversations about other topics as well. So I hope that you will join us. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.